It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. That's Phoebe Sod's cocoa chocolate website. Phoebe Sod's an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. It's a registered trademark of Mars Incorporated. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries. Everybody knows Dove chocolate. It's the best chocolates you can get. They make the finest, silky, smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert Mars technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but everything from sauces, spices, to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you got to go to Phoebe's site, which is pscoco.com, pscocoa.com, and you click on the Shop Now button, or you can even get into the cocoa business. If you contact Phoebe, hit on the contact button. This is a good show, too, for people to sit back and eat some chocolate. Okay, some chocolate ice cream or some of that comfort food, because it's one of those shows. I've been looking forward to this, okay? And because it is one of those horrific stories. But when you meet the author behind the book here, Dr. Michelle Stevens, who wrote this book, Scared Selfless, My Journey from Abuse and Madness to Surviving and Thriving. It's one of those horrific stories, but she does seem to come out of it and thrive. She became a doctor, wrote this book, and she seems like a delightful kind of person. Dr. Michelle Stevens, are you there?
I am here. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I tell you, whoever named the book Scared Selfless probably wasn't thinking of a radio host having to, you know, I guess you got to.
I named the book, and there was much talk of changing that title, but ultimately we stayed with it.
Well, it's memorable, that's for sure. Now, you got a website called MichelleStevensPhD.com, so people can go there and check out your work. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Michelle Stevens.
Sure. Nowadays, I am a psychologist who specializes in child abuse and psychological trauma. I am also a wife and mom, and sometimes foster parent. But as you alluded to, I have a very difficult past. When I was a child of about 8, my mother moved in with a man who was a school teacher, but also a pedophile. And he pretty much immediately decided to make me a sex slave. And so he tortured me and basically brainwashed me so that he could then traffic me within a child sex ring. And I was prostituted for many, many years to other men, as well as used in child pornography. So I have a very difficult past with a happy ending.
I found you because I was watching Dr. Phil. I've become addicted to Dr. Phil because they have it on the local channel here. It's like a marathon all day long. They got like 10 episodes in a row. And I remember from that story that your mother had just started dating this man. It was like the first weekend she met him, and he said, "Let me take your daughter back to my house for the weekend."
Yeah, I don't think that it was the first weekend, but certainly within weeks we had moved in with him. And, almost, and this is a very important story because this happens to single moms. Pedophiles prey on single moms, right? Every single mother is secretly wishing there's some wonderful man who's going to come along and suddenly be a wonderful father to their child or children, right? So pedophiles know this and they prey on it. So that's what this guy, Gary Lundquist, did. He sort of swooped in and basically, made my mother feel like he was going to be the most wonderful father figure in the world for me. And she had complete faith in him because he was a school teacher. So within just a couple of weeks of my mother getting to know him, he suggested that he and I should be alone for a long weekend so that we could get to know each other better. And that is when he started molesting me and torturing me.
And that's when you were 8 years old. What year was that?
1977.
Okay, 1977. So things were a little different back then. Things were a little more innocent. We didn't know what was going on. But still, did your mother make other bad decisions like previous to that?
Yes, as many women and men do.
Yeah.
My mother grew up incredibly poor. My mother's family didn't even have running water, and they had 13 kids in a 2-bedroom house without plumbing.
Wow.
So that's the level of poverty we're talking about. She was the middle child, didn't have much of an education, didn't have much of an upbringing, got pregnant out of wedlock when she was a teenager with me. And like many young women in that situation, she was just constantly picking the wrong men. Her first husband, who was not my father, my father, I guess, skipped out on her the minute he found out that she was pregnant. Then she met another guy who had mental health problems, and then she met this guy. So, yes, she's made some bad decisions.
Right, and these guys, they're like a shark in the water. They can see who's in distress, and they just come swooping right in.
Yes,
yeah.
And I can't stress this enough. Career pedophiles. There's a difference between child molesters and pedophiles. I should make that clear. Pedophiles are people who have a sexual orientation towards children. Child molesters are people who molest children. So there are many, many people who will molest a child because the circumstance presents itself, but they're not really pedophiles. But what I'm talking about here are pedophiles, people who really have an orientation towards children. They are generally sociopaths and con men, and they're very, very good at what they do.
You know what I've never understood? A couple of things, okay, in this field. First of all, you hear about, especially I guess with the Catholic priests, you hear about that they've molested 1,000 kids, 800 kids, 600 kids. Like even a normal heterosexual man wouldn't have that many sexual partners in their lifetime, especially if you're pretending you're celibate and you have to hide, or you can't hang out the bars and stuff. What is that compulsion?
And my stepfather was one of those people. He molested easily over his 20-year career as a teacher, dozens, but I'm guessing hundreds of kids. And, I think the compulsion, you have to remember that when you're dealing with a pedophile, just like any other sexual aggression, it's not really about sex. It's just like rapists who rape adult women. It's not about the sex. It's about the control. It's about the ego. So when you're a predator and your ego gets fulfilled by being able to con people and dominate people, you want to do it as much as possible.
It's just fascinating. Now, in your life, do you find a spiritual connection to this? Like in this evil, that there's a spiritual aspect to it, that these guys are getting some kind of evil gratification from it, some kind of a demonic possession or something?
It's a really interesting thing, because if you watch a show like Criminal Minds, right,
yeah.
they deal mostly with murderers, not with child molesters. But there's always this idea, it's a very monster, demonic thing. I knew a lot of child molesters because I grew up in a child sex ring. They're not like that. They don't seem evil. It's fun for them. I cannot stress this enough. Think of the movie Ocean's 11 and the con men in that movie and how fun it is to pull up a heist, right?
Right.
When it's theft, we can watch a movie about it and think it's fun. Child molesters, I should say pedophiles, are exactly the same way. To them, it's fun. That is their idea of a fun challenge, being able to con people and dominate people.
You know something? It's interesting you say that, because, and I know there's a little bit of controversy about Michael Jackson and whether or not he's guilty. I'm convinced he's guilty, okay? I'm thoroughly,
I am as well.
Yeah, I'm thoroughly.
Absolutely.
But I remember reading because I read the transcripts of Jordie Chandler's father with Anthony Pellicano, the private investigator hired by Michael Jackson,
Right.
and they talk about how he liked to get the whole family involved. Like we had to take a certain pill at a certain time, and they would have to chase him around to get him to swallow the pill, and he had to like rub it in their faces that it was locked in the bedroom. There's a whole lifestyle around this. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes, and Michael Jackson's a perfect. I've talked about Michael Jackson in other interviews, and I mentioned him just for a moment in my book. He is a perfect example of what a career pedophile looks like. They seem very altruistic because that's part of their con game, is to seem like they're very helpful people. The way that they're helpful is always around children now. Jerry Sandusky was the same way. You will see pedophiles very often working with children, volunteering with children. So the community sees them as these great guys, but really what they're doing is looking for their next victim.
Yeah, and building a whole elaborate structure to do it as well. Now, Lundquist, there's even a lawsuit right now that talks about how Michael Jackson's whole business, his whole company and stuff like that was created just for this goal. Now, Lundquist, is he alive today?
No, he died about 20 years ago.
No, that's a shame. Okay. Now, tell us, did you get
Yes and no, I don't think I could have published the book.
Oh, really?
As you well know, it's just very difficult for, any survivor of any kind of sexual assault to find justice, because these guys are also very, very good at hiding their crimes.
Okay, now I had assumed that he was convicted. He never got caught of doing this?
He was caught eventually for molesting 3 students at the school where he worked.
Gotcha.
And he ended up pleading guilty to that. Unfortunately, a few years later, when I finally came forward and wanted to have him convicted, the prosecutor wouldn't move forward with it.
And what year was that?
That was 1990.
1990. Do you think today they'd be a little bit more cooperative with you? And
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I would hope so. This was a small town.
Yeah.
It just depends. I don't know. Look at what just happened with the Stanford swimmer case. There are still a lot of really unenlightened people who do not understand the dynamics of sexual assault.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of them are judges and prosecutors.
So give us an idea. Now, you're 8 years old. He takes you over to his place. Was he at first friendly with you and considerate with you, or was it immediately torture?
In the couple of weeks leading up to it, he had been he had a sort of saccharine sweetness to me.
Okay.
He seemed overly interested, and even at 8 years old, I found that very uncomfortable. It's not normal for an adult man to be ridiculously interested in a child that's not their own. It's a little odd, and I could feel it. But of course, that impressed my mother. So when I got to his house that first weekend, it was like a Friday night when she dropped me off. At first, yeah, he was friendly enough. I remember one of the first things I remember is that he took me into a room, and in this room were nothing but photo albums, like rows and rows of photo albums. And he started to show them to me, and they were all of children. These were not pornographic pictures, but they were just pictures of basically every kid he'd ever known. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures.
And did you find that odd?
Probably at that moment, at 8 years old, no, because he was a teacher, and he just said these were all of his students.
Okay.
But that's another thing to know about pedophiles. They are, they really like trophies. So they tend to collect in massive amounts child pornography and any other sort of trophy, like normal pictures of kids. And after this, then when I went to go to bed, I talk about this is a scene in my book that I remember so very vividly. I had changed into my nightgown, and he was sort of tucking me in, and he asked me if I wanted a picture of myself. And so, he was, again, taking the trophy picture of me, but I didn't realize it then. And he went and got a Polaroid, and he took a picture of me, which I still have. And that picture is very precious to me, but also very sad because it is truly the last picture. It's the picture of the last moment of my childhood. Because right after that, he took me to his basement, locked me in a cage, and spent several days torturing me.
Okay, now, he takes you down to this basement. Were you screaming for help?
I don't remember screaming for help. I don't think a lot of people do. What I remember is being paralyzed with fear, which is why one of the reasons I named the book Scared Selfless. The thing that people don't understand about assault, about violence, is that in the moment that violence occurs, we often become paralyzed, right? This is everyone's nightmare. The monster is coming and we can't run. That's because that really happens. Very, very often at the moment of fear, we freeze, which is what I remember doing.
Okay, so you're paralyzed with fear, but now, again, and then he did whatever he did to you, I can only imagine. But the thing is, now, when you finally got out of there and saw your mother again, did you think to talk to your mom?
Again, I don't remember telling her explicitly.
Okay.
I do remember that when she told me that we were going to move in with him, I went bananas. I was terrified. I cried. I screamed. I begged her not to. I said I hated him. Now, would I have had words to say he raped and tortured me? No. The other thing that people never think about, they go, why don't kids tell? Why don't people tell? Well, I don't specifically remember it, but I'm sure he threatened me. They always do. They threaten you if you tell. They say they'll kill you. They say they'll kill your mother. They say they'll kill your animals. They say it's your fault. These perpetrators use a lot of methods to keep their victims quiet. So, no, I don't think I told my mother in so many words. I don't think an 8-year-old has those words. But I certainly made it clear that I hated him and didn't want to live with him.
Yeah, especially an 8-year-old in 1977, because, 77 I was like 18, so 77 I was about 16. So an 8-year-old in 1977, you had no kind of education in this topic in school. I can guarantee you that. Where'd you grow up? What city did you grow up in? Small town, right?
I grew up. At this point, I was in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Philly, and then later we moved to New Jersey. Okay,
yes, okay. I grew up in Bronx first, and then Staten Island.
There you go.
Yeah, then right. There's no way, and I went to Catholic school. There's no way we had any kind of education in this. And even then, at 8 years old in 1977, you didn't have a voice like kids have now. There's no internet back then. And I have to make this clear. Yeah. Of a certain socioeconomic class and with a certain type of parent, maybe the parents are hip to it now, and maybe the kids have some education in good and bad touch. This still goes on. It goes on a lot. I can't stress that enough. I have clients who come in who are in their early 20s who have been horribly molested. They never told. Kids don't tell. There's a whole lot of reasons, but generally kids don't tell. Yeah, and I'm a little concerned today, too, with these kids who almost joke about what's the phrase they use, chimo and, pedo and stuff like that, and because they've been contacted on the internet, 100 times by these grown men trying to, and they just kind of laugh it off and stuff, like almost like they're immune to it, and they're immune to it.
Right. Yes, and it's just like, all the studies have shown that when we try to teach kids to not leave the playground with strangers,
right,
and they seem to understand, they do it anyway. Yeah. You can tell a kid all these things. They don't understand. And so I really don't think it's terribly different now than it was then. I really don't, sadly. Except that now there are harsher sentences when we finally do put these guys in jail.
Well, but even still, I think the average sentence is 3.5 years. They serve 3.5 years on an 8-year sentence.
Right.
Yeah, but back in 77 it was even easier.
Well, back in 77, it just didn't exist.
Oh, really?
Okay. They're just, I have to stress this. In 1977, child pornography was legal and sold over the counter in Times Square.
Really?
In 1977, there was a child pornography film festival at a public movie theater in San Francisco.
Really?
Yes. There was a gap of about 10 years or so between the time when the Supreme Court ruled that pornography was legal and couldn't be censored. And during those years, anything went, and that included child pornography. It exploded during those years. And it really became part of the zeitgeist. If you remember movies like Taxi Driver and Pretty Baby, with, and even Manhattan, Woody Allen's Manhattan, these are all movies about young girls where it's kind of considered okay for men to be with young girls. It was part of the zeitgeist.
Yeah, there
and
were quite a few movies.
In 1977, they finally made child pornography illegal.
Yeah, there were quite a few movies like that. If you go back and look at them, it's amazing the culture's changed so much. So now, this actually escalated to where he was part of a ring?
Yes.
Well, what was going on there?
It's so funny. We use these terms in the media like child sex ring, and again, it sounds so mysterious or demonic. What a child sex ring is, again, pedophiles, this is their hobby. This is the thing that they have fun with. So what do hobbyists do? They find each other. Pedophiles love pornography. Pornography, even though it was legal back then, was still very, very expensive. So they tend to want to share the pornography, and that's how they would find each other. And so over time, this becomes a very organized thing. Then they start to share kids. And they knew how to contact each other. So my stepfather, right away, decided, he was going to sell me, which is exactly what he did for years. He sold me to other pedophiles.
Okay, this started at 8. When did this all kind of come to an end?
It came to an end when I was about 14, for a couple of reasons. One was that obviously I was out of sort of that pedophile age, although that wouldn't have stopped it necessarily. But what actually stopped it was the fact that I tried to kill myself.
Okay.
And at that point, my mother clued in enough. She sort of quit her job and stayed home, and then he finally didn't have the access to me that he had had for so many years.
Do you think your mother, during this time between 8 and 14, had any suspicions? Did she ever come to you and say, hey, does Mr. Lundquist here ever bother you or anything like that?
It's so hard with my mother, and it's very hard for a reasonable human being to understand the psychology of someone like my mother. What denial is all about.
Okay.
But many, many mothers do this. Did she know? Yeah, she knew. She knew. She, in fact, when I was probably 12, she found a whole stack of very pornographic pictures of me that he had taken when I was maybe 9. And she was very, very upset. She asked me about them. I said, he took them, ask him. He said, yeah, she asked me to take them. And then she got angry with me, not with him. This sounds insane, and yet there are thousands and thousands of women and girls like me who have mothers like this. They don't see their daughter as their daughter. They see their daughter as their romantic rival. And that's what was going on here.
Well, also, too, if your mother was one of 13 kids, do you think any of this was going on in her family as well?
I have no idea.
Okay.
My grandparents were actually really loving, wonderful people. I mean, I'm not going to say that that's what was going on here. I don't think so. I don't think it has to do with that. I think it has to do with the fact that for women who have no self-esteem and little earning potential, who think they need a man, knowing that your daughter is being sexually abused by the man who is paying for everything is a very inconvenient thing to know. So my mother guarded against that inconvenient truth.
Wow, that's really something. That's really something. Now,
and this is not uncommon, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. Now, he was also taking photos of you or videos and selling these as well?
Yeah, he took some photos, but back then, the pornography business was almost completely controlled by the mafia.
Right.
And what he would do, he had a friend or an acquaintance who, I can't say for certain he was in the mafia, but he sure seemed like it, or part of that group. He would drop me off at this guy's apartment. This guy had an apartment in New York that doubled as a film studio. And he would sort of drop me off there for a weekend, and this guy would make pornographic movies. I mean, very sadistic pornographic movies.
And did this involve you with other kids or with adults?
No, with adults, actually. It was almost always with adults.
Did you run into other kids?
But I was a kid.
You were a kid. Did you run into other kids during this?
There were other kids in the ring, and certainly at the same time that my stepfather was abusing me, he was abusing other kids that he would bring into the ring, some of his students. Mostly what I remember at the pornographer's place were young girls, sort of, probably runaway girls, teenagers.
It's just amazing how people are so callous they could do this.
It's so funny. If you grow up in a world of sort of normalcy, this seems so out there. And if you grow up there's like a whole nother section of society where the sort of boundaries don't apply. I don't want to say it's usual, but there is a lot of trafficking that goes on and always has been. There is a lot of child pornography that goes on and always has been. And there is a staggering amount of young girls and boys who get molested.
Yeah, it's almost for a young woman, it's almost a curse to be an attractive young woman, because you're just becoming the target of so much. In the past week, I just had this young woman here in my house, just crying in the corner, telling me about suicide attempts that she made at 9 years old, and foster homes and just all this, the way we treat each other is just unbelievable. It's just
yeah, and that's the really hard part is, and this is, my specialty now is treating people who have been traumatized through interpersonal violence. And, when someone's been traumatized, obviously they have all sorts of physical symptoms, that we think of as PTSD. They have anxiety, they're jumpy, they might have depression. But what I have found is just what you said, the thing that really needs to be healed is the existential question that arises after something like this, is how do you live in a world where people can do this to each other? And if you have any faith in God, how do you live in a world where God lets this happen? These are big questions that have to be answered if you're going to go on to live a happy life.
Well, did you develop a faith in God or an aversion to a faith in God?
It's so I always had a very strong sense of God, whatever that is. I'm not terribly religious, but I'm very spiritual. And so I always had a sense of God. It didn't kill off that. I just thought that God had it in for me for a long time. I wondered why he was punishing me. Now I don't feel that way. As I've moved through life, I feel very blessed, actually, in my life. Even the abuse, in some ways now, is a blessing to me because it allows me to, help other people now. And I really found my purpose in life through healing.
How did this affect your young social life and your young dating life? The first time you went to kiss a boy, your first date, these kind of things.
Yeah, so I had because my abuse was so severe and so frequent, there's a whole lot of things that people develop when they're abusive kids. I call it the trauma spectrum, right? We can start out with things like depression and anxiety, and then you move up and there's PTSD, which is sort of anxiety on steroids. And if you're very, very abused, some people become what's called dissociative, which means during the torture, your mind sort of checks out. If that happens frequently enough, some children develop multiple personalities, and that's what happened to me. So they call it dissociative identity disorder now. But because I developed multiple personalities, and what that means, again, this is one of those things people think is so weird, but it's really not that strange. It's just, if you think about highway hypnosis, right? You're driving along, you get lost in thought, you've missed your exit, you're like, what happened?
Right.
That's what this is. It's just a splitting of consciousness. So when I was being tortured or raped, my body was still there, it was still functioning, and yet part of my mind drifted off. So that part of my mind that drifted off actually did not remember that I was being raped or tortured. And that's how multiple personalities develop. So you've got one part of your consciousness that thinks everything's fine, and another part of your consciousness that's getting raped and tortured. Suddenly you've got two different personalities, right? One's happy, one's very tortured. So that's what happened to me. And because of the multiple personalities, it really was a blessing when I was a kid, because it allowed me to get up every morning and go to school with zero memory of what was happening to me. So had you asked 12-year-old me, are you being abused during the day, I would have said, nope, I have a happy family.
That's amazing. Even on when it's not on such an extreme level, how kids can put these things, they can compartmentalize these things and put it aside and get lost in a game or a cartoon or something, even though they are suffering these great tragedies.
Yeah, and there's been in the past, there was so much talk about repressed memories, and there was so much I want to say sensationalism around that. And it's so interesting because I did not realize how common repressed memories of abuse were until I wrote the book and all of my stepfather's victims started to contact me. And so many of them had at least partially repressed the memory for years. And they were not dealing with the type of abuse I was dealing with. They were dealing with, a few times being molested, but they still repressed it for years. So it must be incredibly common that children do that.
Yeah, it seems also, too, that people remember, like when you start having your own kids and you're raising your own kids, you start to remember things that happened to you as a kid. You say, boy, the way my parents reacted to this same thing was just so different the way I react to it, Did that happen with you as well?
Yeah, I think that that's certainly for me.
Yeah.
There were certain triggers in my life that made the memories come up. When I moved away from my abuser at 21, when I was done with college, was the first time I started having memories. And then when he died, I had a whole other set of memories come up. So there are certainly triggers that allow those memories to come up, yeah. And I think for a lot of people, it's raising your own kids.
Yeah, then let me clarify, because I thought the abuse stopped at 14, but you still lived with him between 14 and 21?
I lived with him until I was 18 and went away to college.
Okay.
And then, and again, even going to college, I knew I didn't like my parents, but I did not know I had been abused.
Wow.
And then right when I was graduating college, I started to have the memories. Totally, they came up spontaneously, and I think it was because I was finally in a position to feel safe enough to start to have those memories, because I didn't need to see them anymore.
Now, and you made the decision to go into college and pursue psychology. You're a psychologist? What kind of...
I am, yeah. I studied clinical psychology. When I first went to college, back when for my undergrad, I studied writing at NYU, and started out life, after college, I was planning to be a television writer, but that's when the memories started coming back to me. And at that point, when I was about 22, I had a complete breakdown. Can you imagine you go through your whole life thinking you've lived one life, and then suddenly you start to have all of these memories of the real life you lived, and it's completely the opposite.
Well, if you got into NYU, you must have had really good grades.
My grades were okay. I was a good writer. I actually just got in on my writing.
Okay. Now, and also, too, there were suicide attempts. Was this between 14 and 20? What was going on with that?
Yeah, my first suicide attempt happened when I was just turning 14. I had gotten pregnant through someone in the ring, and sadly, my stepfather performed an abortion on me with a coat hanger, and I nearly died. And that just threw me into such a depression, and I tried to kill myself. Then I sort of compartmentalized all that, got through high school, And then when I went off to college, all of the symptoms, horrible PTSD, depression, all these things, started coming to me. Although I didn't remember the abuse, I had all the symptoms of abuse. And at 19, I had a really serious suicide attempt where I actually did die, but they were able to revive me.
And what method did you use?
Pills. The first time when I was 13 or 14, I used over-the-counter sleeping pills, and that turned out I took the whole bottle, but those were not lethal.
Right.
At 19, I was taking an antidepressant that had been prescribed to me that was very lethal. And so when I took those, it stopped my heart.
Okay. Let's take a commercial break here. We're with Dr. Michelle Stevens. She's the author of the book, Scared Selfless, My Journey from Abuse and Madness to Surviving and Thriving. You can find her website is michellestevensphd.com. And this is the Stevens with a V, not a PH. There's an upcoming appearance on Dr. Oz. When are you going to be on Dr. Oz?
I'm taping it next week, but I think it's going to be in July that they show it.
All right, so it can be you can watch it in July. Okay, so we'll be back with more of Dr. Michelle Stevens right after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 30% of all people on online dating websites and personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship? 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. Our online infidelity investigation. Give us their email address, and we can trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites, or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. Now, he just sent me a copy of this book. Oh, boy, it's about 2 inches thick, and there's a chapter on just about everybody in this book that you can imagine. The Beatles, and Jack Parsons, everybody's in here. It's incredible. And I definitely recommend this book. There's a bunch of pictures in there, too, of all these people and different chapters and information. Anton LaVey and people I've never heard of, too. There's a whole bunch in here. JFC Fuller. I don't know who he is. But it's great stuff by our producer here, William Ramsey. So check out Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. You can find it on Amazon.com, or you could find it in the Opperman Report .com bookstore. We have an urgent bulletin. It seems that the group Strawman is still on the loose. It has been confirmed that Strawman are Canadian, okay, and that authorities are asking people to stay indoors, lock your doors and windows until this group can be dealt with. You could find more information about this group of Canadians, at strawmanmusic.com. You can have your ad played here. Okay, we're looking for sponsors. Okay, in fact, we desperately need sponsors right now to take this show to the next level. So you can have your your ad played here, read live, like I'm doing now, so artfully. Or we can even work up a little jingle for you with some music and stuff like that and play it here. You have no idea how inexpensive it would be to have your ad played on the Opperman Report on 7 stations. Live Friday night, and another 7 stations live on Saturday night, plus replayed every day of the week on different stations, and then archived on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all different kinds of podcasts, Pod This and Podbean, all different kinds of places who archive the show for us. And on those archives, your ad would play indefinitely, forever. You also get a little banner on OppermanReport.com. You get a mention on the air, you get a little interview on the air, and all kinds of fun stuff if you sponsor Opperman Report. We have an opportunity to get this show on a major AM/FM station in California. We could do. So if you want to sponsor us into that, so incredibly inexpensive that your ad would be heard by a the range covers 5 million people in population where your ad would be broadcast, and all these other stations would be thrown in for free. So really affordable prices to sponsor OppermanReport.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can get a copy of that book at emailrevealer.com, or you can get a copy of that book now. It's back up on Amazon.com. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. And this book has been updated a little bit from the previous book that we had that was available to our wonderful listeners. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Dr. Michelle Stevens, the author of Scared Selfless, My Journey from Abuse and Madness to Surviving and Thriving. And her website is MichelleStevensPhD.com. Got an appearance coming up on Dr. Oz. Now, it does seem like you have survived and thrived. How did you...
Yes.
Yeah. By all indications, okay? But then again, people can have a smile on their face and have a happy sound to their voice, and they're still suffering. But how did you start your journey to how and when did you begin your recovery?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're asking me this because it's, one of the things about the book, a lot of people get stuck on the parts that are about abuse. And the first third of the book is about the abuse that I suffered. Yeah. The second 2/3 of the book are about what that abuse, what any trauma predictably does to human beings and what you have to do to get over it. So, and I can't stress that enough. What I went through obviously is very extreme, but a huge percentage of the population has suffered some form of child abuse, whether their parents were alcoholic, whether they were abandoned, whether they were in foster care. There are veterans who go off to war who become traumatized. There are women who get out of abusive marriages who are traumatized. So no matter how this interpersonal violence touches a person, they tend to have predictable symptoms as a result. And that's really what my book is about. It's drawing the line from trauma to psychological symptoms to how you get over those symptoms.
Then let me, before we get to how you get over these symptoms, let me ask you this. What about now that you have to retell this story over and over and over because of this book? You have to be going through some kind of trauma from that now, right? Because I'm going through trauma hearing it.
It's for many, many years, it affected me. But to talk about it now doesn't. I really have healed from it. Okay. Very thoroughly. And so it doesn't affect me in the same way that it used to. And of course, someone hearing about it for the first time, it's going to affect them actually more than it affects me now, because I've truly made my peace with what happened to me.
I know what you're saying. I've had trauma in my life, and I have to tell these stories over and over again, because I get invited on shows too, But it affects me, and I know it does. And I know right now I'm not dealing too well with hearing these kind of things over and over again, and the guests on the show and my clients and stuff, and this woman in my house in the corner curled up in a ball. Yeah. I'm not dealing with this stuff well. So now, how did you deal with this and get to recovery? What can I tell me what to do? Okay, how did you do it?
Yeah, for me. And this is really the point I want to make in the book.
Okay.
It's a long process. If you've been very traumatized, it is a long process to heal, and it is an active process. The reason that Phil McGraw had me on his show, he loved my book. What he loved about my book was that it's about self-determination. So many people who went through what I went through at this point would be drug addicts, or they'd have, 7 children out of wedlock, or they'd be dead because they killed themselves. There are so many ways my life could have gone that was not the way it went. And the reason for that is, for whatever reason, at a very young age, I really made a decision that I was not going to let it affect the rest of my life. And I made that decision, not that I was going to pretend it never happened to me, which is a lot of people make that mistake. They say, this trauma happened, I'm just not going to think about it, I'm not going to ever deal with it again, I'm going to put it away forever. That doesn't really work very well, because the symptoms come back. You get triggered a lot by different things, right? It doesn't work.
All right.
So what you have to do is actively try to heal from it. You have to, in whatever way that you can, actually face it, which is not human nature. Human nature is to pretend that atrocities don't happen, whether they're our own or someone else's. You can't do that. You have to face it. You have to face the fear of it. You have to deal with those existential questions. I can't stress this enough. This is, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's all about this. He was in a concentration camp. He lost most of his family in that concentration camp. And what he came to was the fact that when horrible things happen and these existential questions come up, we have to find a way to find the answers. How do we live with the fact that people can do horrible things to each other?
And then practically, what did you do? What kind of treatment or what did you do practically?
On a practical level, I got myself into therapy, into psychotherapy, which is easier than it sounds. Most people who have ever gone to a therapist find that it's not easy to find a good one.
Yeah.
They're very expensive, and it's just really hard. Our mental health system is an absolute disaster in this country. People who need help cannot get it. I was one of those people. I was completely broke. When you're broke and you try to find therapy, you have to go to some clinic. Those clinics are manned by students, basically, with zero experience. And so in our country, students with zero experience are mostly treating the worst possible cases, or the hardest cases, whereas people with money who, are having some relationship problems or some career issues, they can afford to go to a seasoned therapist. It's a crazy system that we have. So I spent years trying to find a decent therapist and trying to afford therapy, often working 2 and 3 jobs just to afford therapy, because I wanted to heal so badly. And I went through 8 therapists before I found one that really could help me.
And give me an idea what age range that was when you went into this intensive search for a therapist and finally found one.
It started when I was about 22. As
Right.
soon as I started having memories, I started going to different clinics and groups, and I started reading a lot as well, trying to understand all of this. And then I just kept, all through my 20s, searching for a decent therapist, while at the same time, trying to make money to be able to afford it. And when I was I think I was 29 and had just had my 3rd suicide attempt, for which I was committed to a mental hospital. And at that point, I was introduced to someone else's therapist who turned out to be the one that could really help me.
And did you read a lot of self-help books type of?
Oh, constantly. And that's how I ended up becoming a psychologist, honestly. I was constantly reading books about anything, but really about trauma, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And I would just spend hours over at the UCLA Graduate Library reading psychology books. And so before I ever decided to become a psychologist, I already had quite an expertise in trauma psychology.
What about search churches and different faiths?
Not really.
Okay.
No, that is not the route I went. I think that, it's so interesting. I've had several people who have reached out to me after reading the book who talk about going to different churches. And I say, if it's a spiritual problem, seek a spiritual answer, and that's go to church, find a pastor. If it's a psychological problem, you're probably better off going to a psychologist. I had, psychiatric conditions that needed treatment.
Right. And what about like yoga, meditation, exercise, diet? Did you look into those kind of things?
It's funny. I live in California. You'd think I'd be more into all that stuff, but I'm not. It's funny. I've tried meditation. Meditation doesn't, unless it's transcendental meditation, doesn't work very well on people who have anxiety.
Okay. That's interesting.
They can't do it. And I just had crippling anxiety for many, many years. Okay.
And what about like yoga, exercise, anything like that, or diet,
yeah. I love yoga. I like to exercise. I'm sure all of those things are wonderful. They are not what cured my psychiatric condition.
Right.
It's kind of I just wrote I'm working on an article right now talking about depression. And the title of my article is Sometimes You Just Have to Take the Damn Meds. If you've got some light little depression that comes along once in a while, yeah, maybe tryptophan and exercise will work for you. If you've been, cripplingly abused for years and have horrible depression where you've tried to kill yourself 3 times, you probably just need, psychiatric meds. There are levels of treatment.
Now, what about, again, I hate to be so selfish about this, but in a situation where I'm in, we're obviously doing these shows and contacting these guests, and the clients that I have are causing me problems right now, especially in the past 6 or 7 months, the past year. And other people I've talked to who are my age, too, that are like true crime authors and radio hosts, they're going through the same kind of thing. But we keep going back to this. We're not moving, we keep going back. I'm going to invite a guest next week that's going to have a horrific story just like yours. Could be worse, God forbid, or on the same level. If I keep going back for more trouble here and I keep bringing in these clients, how do I deal with that?
And what you're talking about is sort of secondhand trauma.
Yeah.
It's interesting. If you look at the diagnosis criteria for PTSD, it says that a person has to experience some sort of life-threatening crisis where they fear for their life.
Right.
And so, sort of a horror. Or you have to be a person who is constantly seeing that, such as first responders, cops, ambulance drivers, EMTs, things like that. It is absolutely possible, if you work with this stuff day in and day out, to be traumatized by proxy. Then that's what you're talking about here. You honestly, now granted, I am going to have a bent towards therapy, being a psychologist. You need to talk to somebody about that. Because what's going to happen is that
talking to you. I'm trying to talk to you.
You're going to become numb to it.
Yeah.
The only choice you're going to have is going to become numb to it. And it's basically you've been horrified by all of these stories, and it's exhausted your empathy. And then you're no good to anyone.
Yeah.
This happens to therapists. It happens to doctors. This is why doctors sometimes will seem so cold. You go to the emergency room with a crisis, and they seem like they have no emotion.
Right.
Cops, too, sometimes. It's because that's the only way they know to deal with it, is to be numb to it. But it's not very helpful to other human beings when you're numb to it.
Yeah, you see it happen to therapists, too, and even pastors of churches that can go through this as well. You just get tired of hearing it. We're getting close to the end of the show. I did wanted to ask you real quick about, on your episode of Dr. Phil, you were on there with a woman who was involved with a very elite pedophile ring where they were flying her around on private jets to all kinds of strange stuff. What did you make of that story? You met her. What did you think of her story?
I think I thought of her story exactly what Dr. Phil thought, which is this. There is no question that woman was traumatized.
Right.
You could see it. You could see how absolutely terrified she was. She has been terrorized, and shows all the signs of someone who has been severely traumatized for a very long time. Now, some of the more outlandish things that she talked about, specifically the murder things that she talked about on the show.
Right.
What I had said to the producers was, when someone is just coming out of a trauma situation where they've used dissociation, which she clearly used to get through this, it's hard to know what all is true, particularly because the abusers will try to trick their victims. So, for instance, she talked about several instances of horrible things like seeing a baby be killed or seeing a man be killed in a horrible way. And you'll notice when she talked about those memories, she said she was all about, 5 or 6 years old when these things happen. Now, think about how easy it is to stage something so that a young child thinks it's real.
Sure,
They think
Santa Claus with
everything's
the
real.
milk and cookies, yeah.
Yeah. So abusers know this, and they will often stage things to make their victims feel guilty because it keeps them under control. So, and I can't stress this enough, though. The natural tendency when you hear about atrocity is to want to deny it.
Right.
So the natural tendency of every human being when you hear any story of atrocity is to go, that can't be true. More times than not, more of it is true than you think.
Now,
and then you want to believe. Most of what she said, I absolutely believe.
Yeah, we know
all
it goes
the
on.
crazy abuse and torture, I think it's all probably true.
And
There's no way to know. We don't have a video, but she's going to need years and years and years of therapy before she really knows what's true.
Did she mention any names that we would recognize?
She did not. She was in full makeup
Right.
and using a pseudonym. She is so terrified of the people who captured her or who kept her hostage that she was terrified to give any details so that they'd know who she was.
Gotcha. Okay, we're down to...
And even when I met with her privately backstage after the show for at least an hour. And even with me, a person who, has been through the same thing as her, she could barely tell me anything. I mean, she is just absolutely petrified of anyone, which happens when you've been terrorized.
Yeah. We got no time left. We got like 1-2 minutes left. What do you want to leave us with?
I want to leave everyone with this because, we've been talking about a lot of dark things, but ultimately, my book and my message is not dark. My book and my message is about overcoming adversity. And it's not just for people who, have been through these horrible circumstances. It's about overcoming any kind of adversity in your life by making a decision that you're going to. And it's about grit and perseverance and persistence. That is the message that I have for people. It's really a message of hope. And it is about self-determination. The message in my book is it doesn't matter what you've been through. If you make the decision that you are truly going to overcome it, you can.
That is so true. That is so true. Yeah, the determination is so important, and envisioning and focus. Scared, Selfless, My Journey from Abuse and Madness to Surviving and Thriving, Dr. Michelle Stevens. I can't thank you enough. The website is michellestevensphd.com. You have an open invitation. Anytime you have something important you want to share with the audience or you want to have something new going on, just contact me. I'll put you right on the air, okay?
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
It really was. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Bye.
Good night. Woo. Okay, Dr. Michelle Stevens, Scared, Selfless, My Journey from Abuse and Madness to Surviving and Thriving. If you like the show, OppermanReport.com. There's always more content in the members section. As you can see, I'm falling apart. You guys know the hell I've been through in my life, with some stuff, the custody stuff, and my 15 years in prison. Hey, now I got this every day. OppermanReport.com. You go there, there's a member section, become a member, and keep supporting the show and watch me disintegrate right before your eyes. God bless you all. I love you all, guys. Keep in touch. When I send a donation, OppermanReport@gmail.com. Gladly accept it. Trying to get a hernia operation. Good night.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. pscoco.com is Phoebe Sod's chocolate website. It's the Cocoa Exchange. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange, which is a registered trademark of Mars Incorporated. TCE is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries and makes the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by Mars expert technicians. TCE offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. So if you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet, tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. You got to go to pscoco.com, because that's Phoebe Sod's cocoa site, pscocoa.com, and then click on the Shop Now button. And you can also go into the cocoa business. You can get into the cocoa business with Phoebe Sod and have your own website and your own access to these great chocolate cocoa deals. Okay, we have on the phone with us Amy Vilela, and she's the mother of a young woman named Shaylin. And you can go to shaylindvt.org where you could find some more details on this story. This is one of these really horrific stories. And Amy Vilela, now she lost her daughter due to incompetent and heartless medical system that we have here in this country. And she's devoted her life to her daughter's memory and to getting this story out. Amy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
You are. I'm so sorry about your loss. Like I said, I have my own 17-year-old daughter, and so God forbid, anything like this could happen. Before you tell us about what happened to Shaylin, can you tell us about yourself? Who is Amy Vilela?
Well, I can tell you that I fought my way up. I came from a life of poverty and abuse of every type that you could think of. And I fought my way up as a single mother with my children and tried to teach them the importance of education and making a name for yourself.
How did you wind up here in Vegas?
So my husband is in the military and Shaylin's stepfather, and we got reassigned here in Vegas about 3 years ago.
And so Amy Vilela is a local Vegas, and all the activists you hear that come on the show all the time, everybody knows her. She's involved in all the stuff here locally. Now, tell us what happened. Why did Shaylin have to go to the ER in the first place?
Well, when Shaylin, she called me up, I think it was in March of 2016, and she said she wanted to come out and be close to her siblings and her family. She was living in Kansas City, which I'm originally from. I lived there for about 18 years. And Shaylin decided she wanted to come out to Las Vegas and finish her schooling to become a nurse. And I have two younger children who are 4 and 5 now, but she wanted to be close to her siblings. That was important to her. Family was really important. So when she came out here, she had just driven 22 hours from Kansas City to Las Vegas. the first thing she said was, "Mom, my knee, it's swollen, and look, it's red." Her leg was red and swollen. As a matter of fact, she said it so much that I was starting to get irritated. I was like, "I get it, Shalyn, your leg. Yes." Like, we get it. Your leg's swollen. It's probably just from you traveling. She had had a previous injury in her knee. She had a torn ACL, and she had been to the emergency room in December of 2014. And she had also gone in April of 2015 for a follow-up. And they had told her, at your age, we should wait and see if it will resolve itself before you explore the option of surgery. A lot of times at your age, you'll get enough mobility that you won't want to do knee surgery.
What was her age?
Sorry.
Yeah, what was her age?
She was 22.
22.
Just turned 22.
Okay, so and she took like a 20-hour car ride?
Yes. She drove from there. She had her belongings. She'd sold everything from her home. She had what she hadn't sold in her car, and she wanted to start a new life around her family. We moved quite a bit because of the military, but she knew this would be where the second oldest of my children, her brother, would be settling and starting his life. So she really wanted to connect with the family again.
Okay. And she was going to live with you here in Vegas, or she was going to get her own place?
She was going to live with me initially. At the time of her death, she was looking places with her brother. They were planning his 21st birthday. They were so excited. They were looking around at apartments. She'd already gotten 2 jobs out here. My son was finishing his schooling, and they were getting ready to start life as brother and sister as adults.
And when was this? What year did this happen? What month?
So this was in May of 2015, in June of 2015.
May 2015. Okay. And then, so then she's complaining about the knee. What did you guys
and
do?
Calf.
I'm sorry? And
it
calf?
was a knee and calf, yeah.
Okay, right. So is this like that kind of thing where they warn you about when you're taking a long plane flight that you could get like a clot?
Yes, now that I've looked back, yes, this is something they complain about. There was a lot of external factors. Shalyn had a lot of symptoms and risk factors that should have been a red flag for any physician. Yeah,
because if I know about it, you'd think that someone worked in an ER would know about this. So, okay, so then what happened that day? How did you finally get her? She was complaining about the knee and the calf?
Yeah, so she kept on complaining. It was like, and the main thing that stopped Shalyn from going was she felt her insurance had stopped her last day of work. Shalyn had always been insured, and she had just started a new job. So she's like, it's probably just with the knee. I'll wait till my new insurance starts at my new job.
Right.
And then I'll check it out. It's probably just something that I need to do, like some physical therapy, But then she was horsing around. She had found love again. And she had a boyfriend here in Vegas, and he was a wonderful gentleman, very hardworking, great guy. And they were playing around, horsing around at the pool, and he picked her up to throw her into the pool, and he dropped her on both her knees.
Ugh.
But the one knee that she'd already been experiencing pain in became excruciatingly painful. To the point that she was screaming out in pain that it was the worst pain she ever felt. Mm. I was in Phoenix at the time for business. I'm an executive, and I was down there for a business trip, and I fielded a call from my husband, and he was like, Shalyn's saying it's the worst pain she's ever felt in her life. I could hear her screaming in the background. I'm like, why are you calling me? Take her to the ER. And so Shalyn, being the person that she was very conscious of finances and stuff. And they're like, well, we're not sure if insurance has started or not. And I'm like, we'll handle it. Just tell her we'll pay for it. Just take her to the ER. My husband is a pilot in the Air Force. I'm an executive. We surely can field a payment to the ER for our visit. So they went to the ER, and again, it was just in the one knee. Even though she had fallen on both, the one knee was excruciatingly painful. And so she went to the ER. She went in there, and the first thing that happened was they asked her about insurance. And Shalyn, they said, "Do you have insurance?" And she replied, "No." They then had my husband calling up TRICARE, which is military insurance. It's the insurance that all military, active duty military members get.
Which hospital was this?
This was Centennial Hills.
Centennial Hills, okay. And that was the closest one to you?
Closest one to us. We live up in Providence in Las Vegas.
Okay. So you get in there, and right away they want to find out how they're going to get paid.
Correct. The thing that most people don't realize is that everyone's saying, well, why wasn't she on your insurance? Military insurance does not have to abide by the ACA. They do not cover adult children unless they meet very specific criteria, one of which is currently enrolled full-time in college. Again, she was just moving, and she hadn't started the college out here. She was in the midst of getting enrolled and waiting for the next period to start where she could start going full-time. So she went in there, and they had him calling from the waiting room to TRICARE, which is documented, that calling up to see if they couldn't get her enrolled. This is before she's even seen. She says, "I don't have insurance." And the woman at the desk says, "Well, it's going to be very expensive. There's the door. If you leave now, it won't cost anything." And Shalyn's like, "No, there's something really wrong with my leg."
Right.
So at this time, she's still with my husband and with her boyfriend at the time, and they're sitting in the waiting room. He has to leave eventually. He's tried calling. They've called me again at my job, and I'm like, to be honest with you, I was getting irritated. I'm like, why do you guys keep calling me? This is an emergency. We'll deal with the insurance and the bills later on. Just find out what's wrong, I've never dealt with that myself. I've never had anyone question when I was in an emergency room before I go in about my insurance. That's usually something that is done after you've already been seen and assessed.
Yeah. So, okay. How long did it take before she finally got to see a doctor or even a nurse?
For the timing, I think is about like an hour, and then she was taken to the back. I then field another call from Shalyn. And to be honest with you, I'm getting frustrated because I'm thinking this is simple. You're at an ER. All you need to do is tell them that you need to be seen. I can understand why people question this case because I've never experienced this myself either. I get another call and she's like crying, "Mommy, they're not helping me." And that's really hard. And I remember I was irritated with them. Shalyn, you're just not telling them what you need then. And she's like, "I'm telling them that all they want to do is an x-ray." And I keep telling them, there's something really wrong with my leg and I don't know what it is. And they won't give me anything else.
Oh, because they didn't think she could be able to pay for it. So they didn't want to give her like a full examination.
That is what I think, yes.
Oh, my God.
But, it's interesting that I went to the same hospital. I'm dual insured.
Right.
And I had I have what's called a hiatal hernia.
Yeah, I got a hernia
so
too, yeah.
up over my esophagus doesn't close all the way. And so once in a while I get a really bad case of indigestion, like to the point where I need to have them give me some prescription strength antacids. I went to the same hospital and I was given an MRI, an EKG, intravenous pain medication, and held for observation. So I had no reason to doubt that this hospital wouldn't give her every test that they possibly could to ascertain what was wrong with her. Only difference is I was dual insured.
Right. Now, did they ask all those questions? Like when as soon as you mentioned to me that she had taken that long car ride, like right away, that's the first thing I thought of. Did they ask those kind of questions?
No. As a matter of fact, her medical records, which I have a printout from Centennial, they even have her race wrong. My daughter was African American and Caucasian. They have her listed as Hispanic. She absolutely had no Hispanic in her whatsoever. They said that she had no previous surgeries. My daughter had a metal rod in her arm from a break when she was 9, and she had a huge scar down her arm. She hated that scar. I mean, it was not something she would have forgotten. She also had, they said she had no chronic medical conditions. My daughter had PCOS. She had just filled her prescription for metmorphin just a few days before this visit. And they said no medication. So not only was she on that medication, but she was also on birth control. And she had sickle cell trait, which she knew of. Everything that I just mentioned to you, with the exception of the arm injury, is a risk factor for a blood clot.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
What about, what time of the day was this when she was at the ER? Was it like in the middle of the night? They had like a skeleton staff or something there?
No, I was still in a meeting, so it was around 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Maybe closer to 5, actually, now that I think about it. It was closer to 5.
And what day of the week?
To be honest, I don't remember exactly what day, but it would have been a weekday. Because I was in a business meeting, so it was in a weekday.
Okay. And now, does this hospital have a reputation for doing this kind of shoddy kind of... No, because when you went in there, everything was fine.
When I went, everything was fine, but after I had this experience with Shalyn, I did look online, and it's public knowledge. You can look up online, and there are tons of horror stories on their reviews. And then if you go to UHS, which is the mother hospital, they're a corporation, so they have like an umbrella over a bunch of sub-corporations, or what we call in the accounting world, sister corporations. Centennial falls under UHS, and there is a ton of information about UHS online.
Right, because these hospitals are for-profit businesses. They turn a profit. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're for-profit. And I'm a CFO by trade, so it's accounting 101 that a for-profit exists to maximize profits for its shareholders. That's the only reason why they exist. There's no other reason. That's accounting 101.
And do we know what kind of profit this hospital turns every year?
I know that they have UHS, the largest portion of their profit comes from their Nevada hospitals. And again, they're publicly traded, so this information is available online. It's public knowledge.
But
it's somewhere around the neighborhood of 30% of their profit comes from Nevada.
Yeah, all the hospitals here make a great living here, because I know my ex-wife works for St. Rose, and they all turn a great profit. Can you give us like an estimate of like the general what you think they might be turning a year?
I don't remember offhand the actual dollar amount. I just remember the percentage of their nationwide. UHS it's Universal Health Systems. That's a huge corporation. They own tons of for-profit hospitals, and to have 30% of your profits come from Nevada, that's alarming.
Yeah. Nevada has really bad medical care to begin with. Just compared. I'm from New York originally, so when you compare like the basic care you would get back in New York, and you come here, it's just like amateur hour.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've lived all over because my husband is military. I've never seen anything like it ever. In Nevada, it ranks 47th in the United States patient outcome and safety.
Yeah, it's pathetic. Now, so then they only want to give her an X-ray. What happens next when she's sitting there in this little examining room?
She's begging them for something for the pain and something an MRI. Typically, that wouldn't be the preferred way of diagnosing a DVT, but that's all she knew. She knew that an X-ray. She knew it wasn't skeletal. She was in school to be a nurse. She was already a licensed CNA.
Okay.
So she knew it wasn't, her bone wasn't broken. And, something else interesting is that Shalyn already knew what a torn ACL was. She wasn't asking for them to diagnose a torn ACL. She knew what an ACL felt like. She'd already been diagnosed and had follow-up treatment, which in their records, they say she had no follow-up treatment, which was also reported on the news, but that's false. Shalyn had been only 30 days before this ER visit for a follow-up MRI to ascertain the healing of her knee. So she already knew what that felt like. Shalyn knew something different was happening. She knew something different was happening in her leg, and she just didn't know what it was. She kept on telling Mom, it feels like a Charlie horse pain in my calf. We have like a massage chair in our room, and she was in there every day because the pain in her calf was so intense.
Okay, and with her experience being a CNA, she must have given them her medical history, because there would be no reason for her not to.
From what her boyfriend who was there with her and from her phone conversation with me, they weren't interested in taking her medical history. They did not have any of her medical history in their charts at all. So, most of us, I know every time I've gone to ER, the first thing I ask is, what medications are you taking and what surgeries have you had?
Yeah.
None of this was in her chart. Nothing at all was in her chart. They did not even ask the bare minimum questions for an ER visit.
So then what happens next?
They tell her while she's in there that the only thing that's going to fix her knee is surgery, elective surgery. Not that it's surgery that's required. Having your ACL tear repaired is elective surgery. Many people, including my sister, who's an RN, have had tears for years, 8+, 10+ years, and they only require an ACL to be repaired if it affects your mobility. So Shalyn, after she leaves, she's frustrated. I have text messages from her. She's in so much pain because they didn't even give her a Tylenol for an 8 out of 10 pain. They didn't even treat her pain. She's trying to Google like different clinics in town that do knee surgery to prepare for when her insurance kicks in.
Right.
And they sent her home with a knee brace, with the only instruction is to take it off when she bathes. And for someone that has a knee injury and already has a blood clot, that's a death sentence.
Yeah, that would make it worse.
Yes. It immobilized her knee and made it prime conditions for her blood clot to continue to grow. And she was following those instructions. She was wearing a knee brace nonstop. I even asked her, Shalyn, why aren't you taking that off? Maybe you should bend your knee a little bit. She's like, no, the instructions say take it off when you bathe.
Oh, boy. So, okay, then what happens next?
So she keeps on for the next couple weeks complaining of her knee. And we're like, okay. I'm like, well, they told you that the only thing that can help it is surgery. Well, you cannot like get surgery without having insurance. So we're waiting for insurance to kick in. And again, she doesn't fall under mine.
She's
a new resident in Las Vegas. So she doesn't fall under Las Vegas yet. And in Missouri, there's no Medicaid expansion. The ACA doesn't really apply in Missouri.
She was able to start working though with the knee brace on?
She was working through the pain.
Okay.
She was such a responsible young woman. She was like, I need to continue working because I need my insurance in order to get my knee fixed. And her main concern was, I need to schedule this knee surgery so that I can still go to school when I'm supposed to start and work. And she was so concerned about finances and saving. And I was like, Shalyn, don't worry. If you're a little short, I'm gonna help you. We'll figure it out. I mean, if you need the surgery, you need surgery.
So how long does this go on?
2.5 to 3 weeks.
Oh, God.
And as it goes on, she's like when she's climbing stairs, I remember she's telling me, Mom, I'm starting to get out of breath. I'm really out of breath. This is like a week and a half before she left. So a week and a half after the incident, she's telling me, I'm out of breath. Well, Shalyn had PCOS, which makes you gain weight. So she was overweight. And I was thinking, I told her, well, Shalyn, when you get after your knee surgery healed, we'll start working out together. And that should help you with your breathlessness. That's what I thought I attributed it to. I'm an accountant. I don't know medical things. So I'm thinking, okay, she's overweight. She's out of breath. Yeah. So she just needs to work out, And she knew she was overweight. So it was no mystery to us that she was overweight. And that's what we all attributed it to, including Shalyn.
Okay, so about 2 or 3 weeks go by, then what happens next?
So Shalyn goes back to Kansas City, and she needs to close out in the middle of a divorce. She got married really young, and she had been separated for over a year, and the divorce was finally going through. She was smart. She didn't stay in something that wasn't working, and she knew she was young and that she had made a mistake, and she decided, I'm not going to live through this. I'm going to make the right choice and, break it off. And so she was going out there for the final court date.
Okay.
This was also important because she needed to get financial aid through school. She needed to be able to get a subsidized loan, and she couldn't do it without being divorced. So Shalyn went out to Kansas City to finalize it. She flew out there, and immediately I got a phone call from her father, who lives in Kansas City. He sounds frantic, and he's like, Shalyn's really out of breath, and she's sweating.
Oh, no.
And he's like, Amy, she really needs to lose some weight. I'm really concerned that she's having, she can't even breathe right now. I don't know if it's a change in the altitude. And I'm like, well, Ross, we have to get that knee fixed first before we start, talking to her about her weight control. And again, PCOS, that's polycystic ovarian syndrome. That's the number one side effect. Your hormones are off. And anybody that's had hormones or steroids or anything of that sort, it's the same kind of effect. It makes you balloon up.
Right.
So we thought it was a side effect again of the PCOS.
And what did it turn out to be?
Well, that night, I get a phone call from Shalyn, and she's panicked. And I've never heard her like this. Shalyn, my daughter, was a very strong woman. She was exemplary. I even at 42, my daughter, in some ways, was much wiser and stronger than I ever have been. But I heard her panicked, and she was crying, and she's like, I just want to come home, and I'm so glad, Mommy, that you're letting me be there with my siblings, and that I'm going to continue school, and I can't wait to get home and start my life. And I'm like, Shalyn, this is the last step, honey. Just hang in there. You're going to be home tomorrow. A few days, and just hang in there. Your whole life's ahead of you. I know it sucks to have made a bad decision and you're divorcing, but you're young, your whole life's ahead of you, and it's a learning experience. And the last thing she said, she's like, I love you, Mom. I was like, I love you too. Then the next morning I get a call from her father, which in itself would not be unusual as we're good friends.
Okay.
But his voice sounded panicked, and it was like 4:30 in the morning. And I'm thinking, okay, he usually doesn't call me at 4:30 in the morning. And he was confused. And mind you, she had such a close relationship with her father. Many people don't hear about him, but he lives in Kansas City. He was an excellent father to her. She was a daddy's girl. They had a special relationship. He had gotten up that morning and took her her favorite meal and forced her to eat. He's like, Amy, she wasn't eating. And I was like, no, you have to eat something. And so she ate her favorite meal that he cooked for her. And he's like, all of a sudden, Amy, she's calling out to me, Daddy, call 911. And he's like, she looked so panicked, Amy, and scared and in pain. He calls 911, and he's like, I didn't know what to do. She slumped on the floor holding her chest. And it hurt her to lay her down. It hurt her to sit up. And he said, I didn't know what to do. I froze. And the ambulance came, and they took her in there. And he said that before she left, she slightly raised her hand and waved goodbye to him. And he was on the way to the hospital. He called me, and he said that, I don't know what's going on, Amy. I don't know what's going on. They're talking about coding. Her heart's restarted. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, what do you mean her heart's coded? Like, she's 22. Like, what are you talking about? Like, she's what? I remember looking at my husband. I was like, should I go? Like, she must just be having a panic attack. Maybe from last night she's upset and, like, you know, she's 22. Like, what 22-year-old has a heart attack, you know? And he's like, no. And then I called my sister, who happened to be a critical care nurse at this hospital.
Oh,
that
really?
that
Okay.
Shalom was at. So my sister's an RN, and I call her, and she's like, what? She's like, hold on. I can hear her calling over there. And she's like, this is Ellie. And they're like, they know who she is. She's like, I know about, you know, you can't tell me because of HIPAA. How quick does Amy need to get there? And they're like, get her here right away. And they were asking my sister, has she been to the ER? We don't know. She's 22. She's coding, Ellie. She's coding. And this is her niece. And they're like, Ellie's like, this is my niece. This is my niece. She's panicked. I can hear her on the other line. And they're like, has she been to the ER? And Ellie's like, Amy, has she been to the ER? And I'm like, well, just for her knee. And immediately my sister screams into the phone, pulmonary embolism, pulmonary embolism. And the nurses, she said that she could hear on the other end, the nurse in there that was in there, she was coding, was screaming out, pulmonary embolism, pulmonary embolism. They knew immediately. I mean, immediately that my daughter was coding because of a pulmonary embolism, which is an effect of a blood clot breaking off,
Right.
going to her lungs. And then they knew. And then they started they have what's called clot blisters. They started pumping her body full of clot blisters.
How long was she there in the ER?
She coded for 59 minutes before they could get her heart started again on a continuous basis. They had her on max pressors. I know that they did everything they could. This is one of their own niece sitting in there.
Right.
They were trying everything they could to bring her back. When I flew out immediately after Ellie told me. Actually, my son was driving me at the time, Shalin's full brother. His name is Josiah. He was driving me. And he was actually in his pajamas. And I looked at him, I said, you're getting on a plane. I mean, he went in flip-flops and pajamas, and we both booked plane flights and got out there as soon as we could. When I walked into her room, I remember the whole entire flight out there, I was on Facebook through the internet on the plane. I was flying Southwest, thankfully, and they were like the best. They were getting me off the plane as quick as they could. They were accommodating me and trying to get me as quick as they could out there. And when I got in there to the room, the whole room smelled of blood. And I looked over to my daughter, and every time she breathed, her eyes would flutter open. Her head would fly back a little bit. And then her eyes would close. And I remember going up to her, and I just held her hand, and I was like, Shalyn, fight. Fight, Shalyn, fight. As much as you can, fight this. Your whole life's ahead of you, baby. Fight. You know? That's the hardest thing in the world, to see your kid dying, and there's nothing that you can do. Nothing.
I'm so sorry.
And I looked over at my other kids. They were in there. The two older ones, the younger ones were at home. And they're bawling, laying over her body. And everybody, she was so loved. The whole room, it's just nothing but tears. Just everybody telling her, fight, Shalyn, we're here with you, fight. Please fight for us, fight as hard as you can. And I'd have to take breaks. I'd have to go outside, because to watch your child die is too much for your brain to even comprehend. And I'd go in the parking lot, and I remember screaming, God, please, no, not her. I wanted God to take me instead. I just kept on saying, even as she was dying, God, please take me. Please take me. You know, I've lived my life. Just take me. It wasn't to be. Her pupils blew.
Oh.
And mind you, my sister's on our end, and I have to really applaud her bravery, because she's watching all this, knowing this isn't right. But she's not telling me. She's just sitting back, watching and observing. And she helped raise Shalyn. Her daughter and mine were only a few months apart, and they were like sisters. Shalyn even lived with her for a few years, because when I had to move for the military, she didn't want to leave her school. So Ellie helped raise Shalyn. And I can see Ashley, her daughter, who was Shalyn's age, like a sister to her. She's bawling. And Ellie takes her phone and goes over to her eyes with the light on her phone and opens her eyes and scans her phone over her eyes. Ellie almost passes out. She has to have him come help her. She knows that Shalyn's gone. And Shalyn's father and I just look at each other, and Ross is telling me, Amy, no, please no, Amy. And I'm like, Ross, I don't know what to say. He's like, can we just keep her alive for a little bit more? We're childhood sweethearts, so we're friends. And I was telling him, yeah, Ross, whatever we need to do. Shalyn was an organ donor. She always has been since she was young. She knew she wanted to go into medicine, and it was on her driver's license. So she actually died on the 27th, kept her alive, getting her organs ready for donation. And her main organs couldn't be saved. So we decided at 4:30 that we weren't going to put her through anymore. And they said, ma'am, you know, you might want to step out. And I said, no, she's not going to be alone. So I stayed with them as they took her breathing tube out, holding her hand so she wouldn't be alone. And then I climbed into bed with her. And I held her and sang to her and played her favorite music. And, you know, it was surreal because I had held her like that since she was a baby. It felt so good. And I know that sounds so weird, but I had held her like that since she was an infant. And I was holding my baby Shalyn again. And then her body started to like tense up. And I almost thought I was like, wait, she's alive. She's alive. And my sister, who's on our end, looked at me and shook her head no. But she was hugging me. When she died, her body tensed up like she was hugging me. Oh. And then she took her last breath. And I remember I had like a break at that moment. I just didn't want to live anymore. I was like, God, please. Please, God, take me. And her father was crying, her siblings. That's how we said goodbye to Shalyn. They took her within an hour because they harvested her heart valves, and they've harvested bones and ligaments and tissue and anything they could. I wouldn't let them touch her face because she wanted an open casket.
Right.
Before she was cremated, but her donations helped 35 people. But that was how Shalyn left this world. And it's so unnecessary. That's the most enraging part. She died in this country for no reason at all, except for money. That's hard. That's hard. I was one of those people that thought, I was safe. I'm an executive. My husband's a pilot for the Air Force. We're set. We're upper middle class. This stuff can't touch us, right? That's the false safeness you feel in this country. And that's what lulls many Americans into this false sense of security. And it's a hard lesson to learn if you have to learn it the way I did. And it also has a part of it that shame, that it took this before you start opening your eyes to how many other people around you are suffering this too.
You've devoted your life now full time to lobbying for some kind of a reasonable medical system now.
Yes.
How long did you have to grieve, though, before you threw yourself into that?
I sat in bed for a year after Shalyn died. I didn't even get out of bed except to go to work. That's the only thing that kept me going. My husband, God bless him, he was sitting there every day bringing me meals in bed. I gained like 60 pounds. I wanted to die. I didn't want to live anymore. And then I was on a phone call with my sister, and she started crying. And I was like, why are you crying? She was like gut-wrenching crying, And she looked at me, and she's like, it's through Skype. And she's like, I've lost Shalyn, and now I'm losing you too. You're killing yourself. And she's like, are you going to fight for Shalyn, or are you going to kill yourself? And I thought, you know what? I'm Shalyn's legacy. I'm her voice. And then, something that Martin Luther King always said came to mind, that to see evil and not do anything about it is to be an accomplice. And I thought, I have to fight. I have to fight. And I went to a single payer conference in New York City in January of 2016. And I met Nina Turner.
Ah.
And she was talking, and she heard Shalyn's story. We actually met her by chance. I think it was predestined, really. And we're in the elevator, and she goes, you can't have a testimony without a test. Well, she always says, but she said it directly to me. She's like, you have a test. And I thought, you know what? This is throughout the night that she said this. And I was like, you know what? You're right. You can't testify about something without a test. And I don't want anybody else to have to deal with this and have this test. I have to do something about it. No one's safe. No matter how wealthy you are, whether you're in the military, whether you're Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. You're not safe. You're not safe.
Yeah, in a just world, there would be criminal charges or something like this, and even this concept that we could just turn our eyes and look away while people are suffering.
Yeah. I had a choice when I did this, whether to sue all of the medical staff or not. I let the nurse go. Mm-hmm. She's under orders. The nurse practitioner and the hospital are, in my opinion, they have blood guilt. They have blood on their hands, in my opinion. They could have stopped this, and they didn't. And especially the nurse practitioner was especially hostile towards Shalyn. And Shalyn was telling me how frustrated she was, that she wasn't listening, and telling her that they're not a doctor's office. They specifically told her when she begged for something for the pain and for an MRI to go get insurance and see a specialist. They're not a doctor's office. And unfortunately for them, I was on the phone when that happened. So I heard this, and I was like, Shalyn, and I didn't know anything was deadly wrong, and I thought, well, they treated me really well when I was there, so if there was something there where I thought, it's crappy, it's ridiculous, and I said, man, even after Shalyn, before she died, even after this incident, I'm like, well, none of us will ever go to Centennial again. But I surely would have thought they would have done the bare minimum to assess if there was something wrong with her. That's the piece I didn't know, how little they had actually done. Until I got their own records.
How is that moving along? Are they ready to settle or
No, they are asserting that it is Shalene's fault. We are right now in federal court, and we are waiting. See, in federal court, we could have gone state, but we went federal. In federal court, you have to wait until the judge approves it to go forward. So we've been 4 months waiting for that. This is normal procedure for a court case. Because they're so expensive, a judge has to decide whether there's enough litigating circumstances there that it can actually proceed forward. So we're waiting for that to go forward. We should be hearing any day.
Now, what do you think? Because I know you're working with healthcare now. What kind of a healthcare system do we need to prevent this kind of thing from happening? Like, I don't understand why we allow profit in hospitals to begin with. Like,
exactly. I mean, if you look at it as an accountant, what's more infuriating as I started researching our healthcare system as it stands now is that I understand fully how companies work, right? I mean, this is what I do for a living.
Sure.
I started looking and I'm like, 40%, up to 40% of the money, each dollar you pay into a health insurance company goes for lobbying, advertising. Some of it even goes for them to hire people to deny your claims.
Right.
It goes for the CFOs and CEOs bonuses, and then there's also dividends to their shareholders. Again, the only reason why a for-profit company exists is to make their shareholders wealthy. I mean, you can pick up any accounting book, and this is Accounting 101. This doesn't belong in our healthcare system. And we keep on trying. They have so much lobbyists, and if you look, I mean, you can do any kind of search on most of our politicians. They're receiving huge contributions for their campaigns from the insurance lobbyists, the insurance industries. We are the only, country that is this size and this profitable that does not ensure that all their citizens have some form of health care. We are one of the richest nations, and we still, our citizens, their lives depend on how much money they have. And then I started looking at the Constitution, and I'm like, the Constitution says that our government's put in place to ensure our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I would say that having health care that ensures our life would fall under that. I'm really surprised that we do not have some form of universal health care.
It's a basic human right.
In my opinion, yes. Yes.
But somehow would
you walk by someone on the street and if they're dying, say, no, do you have $100 for me to perform CPR on you?
Right.
I mean, that's essentially what we're doing in the hospitals. I implore all my fellow Americans, this is not the America that I think I thought I grew up under. I grew up in that we won't leave an American behind, right? Is that not what we've all been taught? We don't leave not one behind. We go back. We fight for Americans. But we're okay with letting them die in the hospitals because they're not part of the wealthy. I have a real problem with that.
Well, what I always say is, living here in Vegas, if someone gets lost out in Red Rock, they send helicopters and dogs. They got 100 cops over there looking for the guy, and the fire department, everybody, rescue team. We have a whole rescue part, But you're right. You walk into an ER, and no, we're not going to help this guy.
Right.
So what is the solution? You don't support the Obamacare either, do you?
I don't support repealing it without something else in effect because I realize I am compassionate and I understand there are millions that will lose insurance immediately.
Yeah, but insurance, we need medical care, not insurance.
Exactly. I just feel like it will make it a little bit worse, but I am not a proponent of the AC. No.
Right.
The ACA did not help Chelan again. So there's in a state that did not have the ACA Medicaid expansion. And how many states do we have that are like that? I mean, we only have, I think it's 30 some that did a Medicaid expansion.
Right.
And even then, we still have no 22-year-old thinks I'm going to have a pulmonary embolism and die. I mean, they always talk about it, hear them, well, people who are younger don't need insurance. And I say bull crap. Because if you're a female and you're young and you're taking birth control, you're at a 75% more chance of dying from a blood clot than anybody else up to the age of 35.
Really?
Yes. And so these girls, what does a blood clot look like? How many girls do you think Chelan's age know what the symptoms of a blood clot are? Right. And if they would even know that they were experiencing symptoms of a blood clot? Most of them don't. I would say the majority of them don't. And this is a major, one of the organizations working on blood clots, her daughter, who was in school to become a dentist, 23 years old, she killed over from a pulmonary embolism. And same thing. She just got a little injury on her leg when she was playing sports, had no idea what a blood clot looked like, went to the ER, and she died.
We're running out of time. We only have about 10 minutes left. Then what is our path to a solution to all this?
To me, we need to this country needs to ensure that every citizen has health care. We need universal health care. Anything less than that, we're saying that we're willing to sacrifice some of our citizens for the sake of money and for the sake of profits for our insurance corporations. That's what we're saying. And I don't care how you word it or how you say it or free market or whatever else you want to say. You're talking about people. There will always be, as long as we do not have universal health care, there will always be gaps in insurance. Always.
Sure, but where we are now, we don't even have a proposal for this. We have a proposal, a crazy proposal, to give us less care and less Medicaid.
We have HR 676 in the House right now.
Okay.
That's for universal health care. I know that Bernie Sanders also just announced he's getting ready to present something that offers a public option that's somewhat better than what we have now, but it's not the same. We need to have citizens out here, like at my healthcare rally, at healthcare rallies across the United States, demanding from their government that we make our for-profit hospitals, force them to become nonprofit. The HR 676 does that. It also reimburses them for cost for transforming into a nonprofit. We need to take the profit out of healthcare.
Right.
And make it about saving human lives, which is what it was meant to do.
Right, because if they're making these obscene profits, that money could go to pay these premiums. Everyone complains about the deductible so high and the premium so high. They wouldn't be if they weren't making all this money.
Right. Not only that, we pay more for health care than any other country,
right.
And we get the least amount because we're paying for each CEO's huge bonuses. We're paying for the dividends to their shareholders. We're paying for their advertising. We're paying for all kinds of things that do not include health care. Our government would actually save money, and the average citizen, except for the top 2% of the United States, would save money every year, and we would have free health care.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Now, there is a rally coming up on April 8th. At the Lloyd Federal Courthouse over here in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Now, it seems that a lot of these people protesting their congressmen, their senators and stuff like that, sitting outside their offices demanding these town halls, it seems like we are getting some kind of action when the media acknowledges us. So this could be something that, it's in the news right now, this crazy Trump plan, this Ryan Trump plan, to make us even worse. That we could take to the streets and take to our feet and get down in front of these congressmen and call your congressman. Now, what is this bill we're supposed to be promoting?
It's HR 676, and since the Trump plan that didn't go through the House, everyone's feeling a little law of safety right now.
Right.
But have no misunderstanding. There will be a round two. we need to be out rallying. This is the local part of the rally. It's a nationwide rally on April 8th. There's a whole coalition of different organizations and unions that we are fighting for healthcare for all. And if anybody needs any information on it, you can go to healthcare-now.org. And we are fighting tooth and nail to try to get this to go through. And we have to have the support of all of our citizens and making a ruckus just like we've been doing. And that is what's going to make them listen, that we won't accept anything less.
And the website you set up for your daughter, Shalyn, is ShalynDVT.org. Can you spell that out for us, though?
Yes, it's ShalynNNEDVT.org.
Amy, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, and I know it wasn't easy, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And I think it was important to let you get that out and let the people hear it, and really, and I think this could make an impact. So I can't thank you enough for going through that for me.
I appreciate it. You know, worst thing for a parent is not only to have their child have them die, but have them die in vain.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I want you to promise me that if anything comes up, you need any kind of promotion or anything, you just call me up. I'll put you right on the air, okay?
Will do.
Thank you, Amy. God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay. I was, listen, I can't take this stuff anymore, I tell you. God bless this woman and Shalyn's father and stepfather and the brothers and sisters and stuff like that. I'm just asking to keep them in your prayers. But we can't let this kid die in vain, And so, April 8th, down here at the Federal Courthouse building, I'll be promoting the event coming up. But it's just, I just did a whole show on this called Opperman Care, where these obscene profits that these hospitals are making. And this whole idea that we give money to a middleman, to these insurance companies, so that they can pay their CEOs and they can pay for advertising and they can pay for people to turn you down. It's just insane. I mean, we have to come to our senses and stop all this foolishness and stop being taken for suckers here. Otherwise, this what you heard happen to this woman can happen to any one of us, and we could be in this position, heartbroken and lying in bed for a year. So God bless Amy Vilela and her daughter Shalyn. It's ShalynDVT.org. I'll have all the links in the descriptions and stuff like that. Thank you so much, guys. And don't forget the OppermanReport.com member section. Keep us supported there. There's a lot of more content, new shows in there. We got to get this stuff out here.